The morning I believed would honor my late mother with one final blessing instead became the moment every certainty in my life shattered beyond repair. I walked into a historic law office in downtown Chicago expecting to settle her estate, but before the meeting ended I uncovered a secret so devastating that it made every memory of my marriage suddenly feel like a carefully rehearsed performance instead of a genuine love story. The estate attorney carefully reviewed several documents before pausing, removing his glasses, and asking whether I remembered signing legal papers that officially ended my marriage nearly 3 months earlier, and I could only stare at him because the question sounded too unbelievable to exist in real life. I laughed nervously and insisted there had to be another woman with my name, because I had shared breakfast with my husband that very morning, listened to him, wish me luck, and kissed him goodbye before leaving the house. Without saying another word, the attorney quietly turned his computer monitor toward me, and I watched my own signature appear on every page of a finalized divorce agreement that had already been approved by the court weeks earlier. While my heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe, every signature belonged to me, every date was authentic, and every official seal proved that the marriage I believed I was still living had legally disappeared long before I ever walked into that office. My name is Madison Carter. I was 37 years old, and until that unforgettable afternoon I believed I had built a life most people could only dream about with my husband, Ethan Brooks. After years of sacrifice and determination, together we had transformed a tiny consulting business started from the dining table of our cramped apartment into one of the fastest growing technology firms in Illinois, earning admiration from employees, investors, and everyone who believed our success came from an unbreakable partnership. Looking back now, I realize the warning signs had surrounded me for months, but grief over my mother declining health and my endless hope that our marriage would survive blinded me to every uncomfortable truth standing directly in front of me. As I left the attorney office carrying documents that proved my entire life had been rewritten without my knowledge, I made one silent promise to myself that no matter how painful the truth became, I would uncover every secret hidden behind the smile of the man I once trusted more than anyone else. During the drive home, memories I had ignored for months began connecting like pieces of a puzzle, and one particular evening refused to leave my mind because it suddenly carried a completely different meaning than it had at the time. While my mother was fighting for her life in intensive care, Ethan had arrived with a thick folder of paperwork, explaining that our company needed immediate approvals before an important partnership expired. And I had signed every page without reading a single line because my heart was too overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion. That painful realization convinced me not to confront him immediately because anyone capable of hiding an entire divorce while pretending to be a devoted husband was almost certainly hiding far more than one terrible secret. Instead, I quietly hired a respected private investigator named Daniel Harper, asking him to examine Ethan's financial records, daily routine business dealings, and every unexplained trip he had taken during the previous year without allowing anyone to suspect that an investigation had even begun. Within only 2 weeks, Daniel returned carrying photographs, financial reports, and surveillance notes that completely destroyed the remaining trust I still carried inside my heart despite everything I had already discovered. The evidence showed Ethan regularly visiting an elegant lakeside townhouse on the outskirts of Chicago, where he spent nearly every evening with a woman named Lauren Pierce, a person whose face instantly filled me with disbelief, because I had once considered her part of my own family. Several years earlier, Lauren had arrived in Chicago with nothing except unpaid bills, broken confidence, and a desperate hope that someone would give her a chance to rebuild her future after growing up in poverty. I had paid for professional training, introduced her to valuable business contacts, helped her secure a stable career, and even welcomed her into holiday celebrations, believing genuine kindness always found its way back to the person who offered it without expecting anything in return. Daniel continued revealing details that felt almost impossible to accept, explaining that neighbors believed Ethan and Lauren were happily married because they attended community events together and lived as though they had always been husband and wife. Watching those photographs spread across the conference table, I realized the greatest betrayal was not simply that my husband had chosen another woman, but that he had built an entirely different life while allowing me to keep believing I was still living inside the one we had created together. As the investigation continued, the betrayal grew darker with every report Daniel delivered because the deception extended Far beyond secret relationships and hidden addresses into the foundation of the company, I had spent more than a decade building. Financial analysts discovered a network of shell businesses receiving large payments from our corporation, and those businesses were quietly controlled by individuals connected to Lauren and several members of her extended family. The money being transferred through those accounts totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars, and each transaction had been disguised as consulting fees, software contracts, or operational expenses that appeared legitimate unless someone examined them closely. While I had been working late nights, negotiating contracts, and sacrificing personal happiness to keep the company growing, Ethan had been using company resources to fund luxury vacations, expensive vehicles, designer wardrobes, and a lifestyle designed to impress the woman he chose over our marriage. What hurt even more was discovering a young boy living in the townhouse who proudly called Ethan his father and followed him everywhere with the admiration only a child can give to someone he completely trusts. For years I had endured heartbreaking medical treatments, disappointing test results, and emotional pain while hoping to start a family of my own. Yet the man who promised to stand beside me through every struggle had secretly created the family life we once dreamed about together. Several nights passed without sleep as I reviewed documents, photographs, and financial records spread across my dining room table, trying to understand how a person could maintain such an enormous web of lies without showing any sign of guilt. Every anniversary celebration, every encouraging conversation, and every promise Ethan had made suddenly felt rehearsed, as though I had been unknowingly sharing my home with a stranger who only pretended to be the man I married. Eventually I realized that confronting him emotionally would accomplish nothing because people who invest years into deception rarely abandon their lies simply because the truth has been discovered. Instead of reacting with anger, I assembled a team of attorneys, forensic accountants, cybersecurity specialists, and corporate investigators, and together we began preparing a case that would expose every secret transaction, every fraudulent document, and every betrayal hiding beneath Ethan's carefully constructed image. For nearly 6 weeks, I behaved exactly as Ethan expected, smiling through dinners, discussing business plans, and pretending nothing had changed while my legal team quietly gathered evidence strong enough to withstand every possible challenge in court. Every conversation, financial record, email, and digital transaction added another piece to the growing case until the mountain of proof became impossible for anyone to deny. When I finally invited Ethan into my office for a private meeting, he walked in with complete confidence, believing he still controlled every part of my life and that I remained too trusting to question his decisions. The moment I placed copies of the secret financial transfers and photographs of his second life on the desk, his expression changed for only a second before he forced a smile and attempted to dismiss everything as misunderstandings and harmless business arrangements. As his excuses collapsed one after another, Ethan stopped pretending to be innocent and blamed every terrible decision on the disappointment we had experienced after years of unsuccessful attempts to have children together. He admitted he loved Lauren, claimed I had become too focused on work to notice what was happening, and even warned that exposing him would destroy the company because too many employees depended on its success. His threats would have frightened the woman I used to be, but the months of betrayal had transformed my fear into quiet determination that could no longer be manipulated by guilt or empty promises. I calmly informed him that his access to every corporate account had already been suspended, his executive authority had been frozen by the board of directors, and independent investigators had secured every important server, financial record, and confidential database before he even entered my office. The final stage of my plan arrived during our annual leadership conference, where investors, board members, and senior executives gathered expecting to celebrate another successful year for the company instead of witnessing its biggest scandal. Ethan confidently stepped onto the stage believing he could still control the presentation. But within moments security officers entered the room with law enforcement officials, and the carefully hidden truth he had protected for years began unraveling in front of everyone who had once admired him. The investigators presented detailed evidence showing years of corporate fraud, embezzlement, falsified contracts, and deliberate misuse of company funds, leaving the audience in complete silence as every accusation was supported by documents, financial records, and digital evidence. Police officers calmly approached Ethan in front of the board members, and the man who once believed he was untouchable was escorted out of the conference hall in handcuffs while reporters waiting outside captured every heartbreaking moment. Just when it seemed the story could not become more shocking, another truth surfaced that completely changed the lives of everyone involved in the deception. Court-ordered DNA test confirmed that the little boy Ethan had proudly raised as his own biological son was actually fathered by another man, proving that the family he had sacrificed his marriage, reputation, and career to protect had been built on the same dishonesty he had inflicted on everyone else. Several months later, I officially became the sole leader of the company after rebuilding its reputation, restoring the trust of our employees, and implementing stronger financial protections that ensured no one could ever abuse the business again. My mother's carefully protected inheritance remained completely mine because the secret divorce had legally separated Ethan from any claim to those assets, turning the scheme he believed would make him wealthy into the very reason he walked away with nothing. Today, when people ask about the darkest chapter of my life, I no longer describe the afternoon I learned my marriage had secretly ended because that painful discovery was actually the beginning of my freedom and personal growth. I learned that kindness should always be balanced with wisdom. Trust should be earned through consistent actions instead of empty promises, and losing the wrong people often creates space for a future built on honesty, peace, and genuine happiness. If my experience has taught me anything, it is that the truth may arrive later than we hope, but it always has the power to restore our dignity and give us the courage to begin again with greater strength than before. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.